Hello, everyone. David here. Welcome back to the DGR podcast. I hope you're all doing well. This is episode number 70. Pretty cool, actually, that we got to episode number 70. And I'm going to do a solo podcast today. I am going to answer just a couple of questions. It might be a slightly shorter one. We'll see how we go. I have one interesting question that I think everyone can probably have their own take on. So that is around what sports would you encourage your kids to play, or your potential kids? I don't have kids to play to help them develop into a great all-round mover. So I am going to try and answer that question. Depending on the day that you ask me, I'll probably answer it in a different way. But I think it is an interesting question to think about, like the development of kids, what maybe I was missing as a child, what other people were missing as kids, and what I actually have thought about this in the past as well. And I've had these probably conversations with different people in the past, and I'm open to being convinced in different ways around that one. And then the other one is, if you're stuck for time in clinic and your assessment skills aren't that great, so you're spending a bit longer on that portion of the session, you don't have enough time maybe to coach people through the movements that you would like to coach them through. Do you have any advice on that around helping them be more successful doing their homework? So I'll chat around just a couple of tips for that as well. And maybe that is to do with not just in clinic, but coaches in general, getting people to do their homework, or getting people, like, how do you choose what homework to get them to do? So those are the two. There's another one that I may or may not get to. We'll see. I won't even read it out in case I couldn't be arsed answering it at the end. We'll see. Not that the person that asked it, yeah, I just put my foot in it there, but it's not that it's a bad question. We'll just see. So first question, what sports would you encourage your kids to play to help them develop into a great all-round mover? Okay, so I think it's important to not just think about like what sports they're going to be playing to help them develop into a great mover, but also help them develop as a great person in general. Playing sport, or let's just talk about like movement practices, not just sports. You're going to get different benefits outside of just movement from socially and learning in all different ways. So if you break it down into ball sports, so like team sports, let's say, so basketball, rugby, football, Gaelic football, hurling, soccer, American football, all this stuff. Then you break it down into like track and field, or you have a separate category like track and field. You have a separate category which is like striking and grappling, mixed martial arts, those type of things, taekwondo, karate, all those type of sports. Then you have like dance and gymnastics, sports like that. And then you have like miscellaneous, let's say, things like parkour and stuff like that. So those are the ones that like initially have come to my mind. I'm sure there's a lot that I haven't mentioned, obviously. But I feel like for the most part, these are the most popular categories of sport. And then there's non-team sports that are still ball sports, maybe like tennis and golf and things like that as well. So maybe that's another category, actually. So let's try and break down what might be beneficial for a child, boy or girl, or anything else that they want to identify. It doesn't matter, but let's just think about, okay, what would be most beneficial for them as they develop, as they grow, and maybe they want to specialize into a certain sport as they get older, maybe as a profession, maybe just to be like playing that sport for a semi-professional or an amateur level, or maybe they just want to stay a generalist, but what would be most beneficial for them? Obviously, you could say, why don't you just do a mix of all of those things? But maybe that's not quite realistic because there's an opportunity cost and there's obviously time constraints as well. I suppose for me, growing up, I played a mix of everything. So I played a lot of Gaelic football, I played a lot of hurling, I played a lot of soccer, actually. So that's what we call it in Ireland. Soccer was probably my favorite sport growing up, I would say, up until the age of maybe 13 or 14. I played rugby for about a 2 to 3 year period. I didn't do any striking. I didn't do any boxing, kickboxing, any martial arts. I didn't do any gymnastics. I didn't do any track and field, nothing like that. So I only played ball sports and team sports pretty much as far as I can remember. And I did a bit of swimming as well. Actually, I put in swimming maybe as another category. I think First off, a team sport with a ball is going to be number one for me. I think it probably doesn't matter too much what you choose. I think like you could have soccer, you could have Gaelic football, you could have hurling, you could have basketball. Those are probably like the top four, let's say, that I would probably, if I had a child growing up in Ireland, probably not a whole lot of basketball, although I did play a bit of basketball in primary school as well. But I would probably have them playing Gaelic football, hurling, and soccer, which most kids in Ireland probably do who are interested in playing sports. So I'd probably have those three things, a mixture of those three things. They're going to be played at different parts of the season. Great thing with those things: one, you're getting a massive mix of movement. So there's sprinting, there's longer distance running, there's change of direction, acceleration, deceleration. You have to deal with someone else's body. So there's body positioning, manipulating a ball, manipulating someone else's body. There's spatial awareness. There's huge tactical elements to the game in terms of there's different positions that you can play, there's different types of bodies that you're going to encounter. There's the fast guy, there's the slow guy, there's the strong guy, there's the tall guy, there's the small guy or girl, there's the very physical player, there's the bitch of a player, there's all these different things. So you're going to encounter so much in team sports like that I think they're probably like invaluable and an absolute must to have as part of a movement development practice as a younger person, as a child. And the good thing with those sports is you can have them for life, I think, particularly basketball and soccer. Actually, I think a big failing of Gaelic games, Gaelic football, and hurling, I was going to say Gaelic hurling, Gaelic football and hurling, is there's not really an element where, okay, I've retired from playing at a serious level and I'm going to keep playing. There is like a junior level, which people laugh at, where it's like the older fat guys, but very likely, like when you go and play that at that level, when you're in your mid 30s or your 40 or whatever, like they are going to try and cut your head off if they have a hurley in their hand. So that's an issue. But if you go and play a game of five-a-side soccer, or you go and play a game of pickup basketball, it seems like you can play them sports at a very casual level for the rest of your life, whereas that's definitely missing in Gaelic football and hurling, probably because they're played on a bigger pitch, the ball travels further, it involves more things. So the very thing that makes our Irish sports so exciting and probably some of the best sports in the world is also probably the thing that detracts and stops them being accessible when you start to hit your 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on, because they're very physical. They require big pitches and they don't work as well in small-sided games as soccer and basketball do, where you can have one-on-one, two-on-two. Not really, you can't really do too much of that with hurling or Gaelic football. So I think having a child do a team sport and be part of a team and develop all those movements that come around with that, and the cognitive tasks and what's happening at their eyes and what's happening with a ball, is the best thing you could do. Best bang for your buck by far. Now, where I felt like I missed in my development massively was track and field. I would definitely, if I had a child now, whatever age, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up, whatever age, I would love them to be doing track and field. And if I had to choose in track and field, I would have them sprinting. That's probably number one. And I might have them doing some throwing, but I would ideally like them to just be exposed to all different types of track and field, but definitely sprinting, because no matter what, if you train sprinting, it's going to benefit every single other sport that you could do. So if you're a soccer player and you train to sprint, you're going to be faster for soccer. We all know speed is like pretty much, no matter what the sport is, it is the skill that everyone wants more of. It is the thing that everyone wants more of. And it's also the thing that everyone's afraid of. So I think sprinting is a massive thing. Your gait cycle is going to be absolutely huge, and learning to sprint really well from a young age, and just even outside of the technical aspects of it, learning the technical aspects of it, getting exposed to just running really fast, or as fast as you can run, a couple of times a week is a really big deal. The other one is throwing something, obviously, is a big part of what makes humans to be able to pick something up and throw it as hard as you can. And that is a massively, sprinting and throwing are two big fascial movements where it's coming, it's the full body, it's all about energy transfer. Sprinting and throwing I would have as a big part of it, but if I could only choose one in track and field, it would be sprinting. That's going to carry over forever. That's going to be so good for your heart, for your muscular development, for your tendons. You're training plyometrics when you're sprinting. It's just amazing. And that's one big regret in my development. I will never forget one of my friends came into our primary school, which is, I can't remember, elementary school or whatever you call it in America. And he actually came to our school maybe in like third class or something like that. So maybe, I don't know the ages, maybe like 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that. Yeah, probably 9 or 10 or something like that. He came into our school, he joined our school, and he was really fat and small. And he was really slow, and he started doing track and field. And I have a vivid memory, and I don't have that many vivid memories of my childhood, but he started doing track and field. He started basically going sprinting, let's say, with the local athletics club. And within 6 months, he was the fastest kid in our class. And I actually had the wherewithal at that stage to recognize that and say, what the fuck is this guy doing? Because I wanted to be fast, because I was like the 5th or 6th fastest kid in my class. And my brother, who was 4 years older than me, he was like the fastest kid in school. He was faster than everyone else. He won every school sports day, gold medal. My sister was also probably the fastest person in her class. So whatever reason, like, the genes were there, but I wasn't able to transfer it over quite as well. I wasn't the slowest kid, but I definitely wasn't the fastest kid. And I can remember that guy, how quickly he changed. And he looked like my memory of him looking back is like looking at an Olympic level sprinter, the way his technique changed and everything. And he was just so efficient within a few months. So I can remember saying to my mom, I want to go down to this track and field group. And I can remember we got in the car one night. She brought me down. We sat in the car outside. And I didn't go in. I bitched out. I said, no, I don't know if he's there. I don't know. Do I go in that door? I don't know what's going on with the group. I don't know who the coach is. And I just bitched out. I didn't go in. And I never went back because I just didn't get out of the car. Actually, funnily enough, I talk about that now with like getting to jiu-jitsu. I just have to go down and get out of the car. Maybe that's why I just made that connection. Maybe that's why I speak about that all the time. I'm just successful. I don't have to do anything else except for get out of the car and walk in the door, and that means I'm going to be successful for the most part. Now, obviously, you can have good and bad sessions, but maybe I just had a bit of counseling with myself there and realized why that connection was important. So I would definitely be training with a kid sprinting. I think it's irreplaceable. And to learn that early, huge deal, massive advantage. And I know one kid, a couple of kids that, not kids, like teenagers who are at a level where they have a potential now to go to like maybe an English Premier League club, sign and become a professional footballer. And they're doing their gym work. They're doing their like all their football skills outside every day, obsessed with all of that. And I find it hard to believe that they still don't, as part of their like academy, which is a really big, very professional type of academy, they still don't practice sprinting. And it's just, and one of the kids he's not the fastest kid in the world. He's certainly not slow. He moves well, but he could be faster, particularly for the position that he wants to play. He could be, and he needs to be faster. And he's doing his gym work. He's getting really strong. And he's a very technical player, very tactically astute, but he doesn't sprint well enough. He's not fast enough. And what better way, and it's hard for me to believe that his coaches haven't said this, why aren't we practicing sprinting? It doesn't make sense. So definitely a ball sport with a team, and definitely sprinting. And then a bonus would be throwing, like javelin, something like that. I think you could get that elsewhere, but I think throwing could unlock another level of athleticism and the power that you have to learn to generate and how you transfer that energy. And also, it's obviously upper limb stuff and stuff like that. It's going to be a really big deal, but it's not a non-negotiable. I think sprinting is a non-negotiable early years. I think a team sport is a non-negotiable. I think throwing, not quite, but definitely could be good. The next like tier, so I don't think we've exhausted a kid yet. I think like you're getting maybe 2 or 3 sessions a week in a team sport. And I think you're getting some sprinting once a week. Let's say once, let's say twice. I don't think they're exhausted yet. I think they're absolutely fine. The other thing that I would consider, or actually, the other thing that I now think is a non negotiable is fighting, is that they're proficient at fighting. And like self-defense, but to me self-defense is fighting. It's not some bullshit self-defense techniques. It is striking. It is learning to strike and learning to grapple. And I think of myself as a kid. I was in fights, not that many, but I was definitely in a few. I have seen fights. I have seen the respect in like school and stuff that the people who can fight, I've seen the respect that they garner by not needing to fight, by people just knowing that person is dangerous or has potential to do harm, and I'm going to leave them alone. And I think that is very important. I really do. And I think being able to be having not just the ability to fight, but the confidence to know if I need to, I could actually defend myself and I could do damage to this person if I need to. I think as a kid, that's very important. I was in a situation once, I got robbed, I got my phone robbed from me from two guys, and I didn't fight. I just left them take it. I was probably 13 or 14 at the time. It was very dark. It was in a bit of a dodgy place, and I let them take it. And if I fought, I could have won. I probably wouldn't have won because there was two of them. I probably made the right decision. But what if they decided to fight me? And in that moment, you don't know what could happen. And I had no real ability to defend myself in my class in school. Maybe I was, just by virtue of being semi-athletic, I probably could have won a fight against 50% of the kids in my class, maybe 60%. And I would have lost the fight against the other 50%. In my adult life, I know I can't fight particularly well. And what I know, this is a bit like, I don't know how to describe it, but what if just someday someone decides for whatever reason they're on drugs, they just snap, they don't like the look of you, they are a weirdo, they're homeless, who they need money, they're going to rob you for whatever reason, I don't know, that someone just decides, I am going to try and hurt this person, kidnap this person, assault this person, rape this person, all these other things, man or woman, and you don't have the ability to defend yourself, then that is an issue. And whether you want to acknowledge that or not, it absolutely is an issue. And if I had a kid, I absolutely would want them to be proficient at fighting. With jiu-jitsu now, I see some quotes and stuff like how important jiu-jitsu is for learning how to, like in a street fight. There's a weird quote that goes around, and I've seen it, that 90% or something of street fights go to ground. So this is why jiu-jitsu is so important. I think that's a bullshit percentage. I really think that's a massively bullshit made up percentage, and probably made up by like the Gracie family or someone like that to try and promote jiu-jitsu. So that they can make more money from it. That is a bullshit. I've seen a lot of fights in town over the years, drunken fights in schoolyards. I've seen a fair few. I've been part of a few, and I've seen a fair few. And what I will say is, most fights do not go to ground as far as I'm concerned. If they go to ground, it's because someone has been punched and knocked onto the ground. Most fights are not, as far as I can see, getting into a grapple where the grapple is being brought to the ground. Obviously there is a decent percentage are, but as far as I can see, most fights are won and lost by someone getting an absolute punch in the face and get knocked out, or get knocked onto the ground, and then the person can kick them in the head or jump on them and beat the shit out of them from a top position. So as far as I'm concerned, as I think striking is the most important. So I would like my kid to be proficient at striking. And I think the best form of striking is not boxing. I think it's probably kickboxing or Muay Thai or something like that, where you can actually punch and kick. I remember seeing a guy in town one night. When I say town, if you don't know what town means, town means, in Ireland, if you're going to town, it means you're going on the beer in town. It's not like I'm going to town to shop. It means I'm going to town to go on the beer. And not just have one or two, you're actually going on to town. I'm hitting the town hard. So I saw a guy one night who was walking after, it was like a bully walking after a guy, and he was marching up the street saying, "Give me a chip." He had a hot chip, if you know what that is, like chips, salt and vinegar from a bag, cooked chips. And your man, the bully, was saying, "Give me a chip, give me a chip, give me a chip." It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, walking up the street after a guy. The young fella looked only like 16 and he was backing away. Next thing, he threw this roundhouse kick at the bully, and he like clipped him on the nose. It happened in a split second, just hard, just like an absolute flash, and the bully literally turned around and sprinted off. And in that moment, that was the first time I've seen someone throw a kick like that in a street fight type of situation. And I was like, holy fuck, you really don't know who you're coming up against. Never start a fight on someone, even if they look scrawny and skinny. This fella, if he wanted it, like, it was a warning shot. If he wanted to, he was kicking that guy in the temple, and that guy was lights out. So I would really love my kids to be proficient in striking. And I think kick and punching is better than just punching. But this brings up the issue of concussions and head injuries and stuff like that. So obviously, as a child, you do not want to get hit in the head, or as a teen or an adult, you do not want to get hit in the head. So are you practicing a fight sport, a striking sport, but are you learning to defend yourself, learning to strike, but as a result, you're also in training, you're getting hit in the head? That is a massive issue. And I know, like, it's getting better and better with regards to sparring shouldn't be done like very often, and it shouldn't be done at a high level. You shouldn't really be getting hit in the head. You're wearing headgear and stuff like that. Still, I think you shouldn't be getting hit in the head at all. Like, literally 0% of the time should you be getting hit in the head, especially as a child, especially as anyone, but especially as a child. Your brain is developing. You see some videos online sometimes where there's kids like 6 or 7 years old doing taekwondo or boxing or something like that. They have big heavy gloves, they have headgear, and they're messing and they are getting hit in the head. And it is funny, but also this is causing damage to your brain. What the fuck are you doing? I don't know the answer to this, but I would love my kids to be able to learn striking, kickboxing, or Muay Thai, or something like that in particular. But I don't know. But no, not getting hit in the head. So maybe it's been done with a bag, which means that they're not going to be as good at it as they could be if they were sparring, but maybe it's good enough so that they can protect themselves. So something like that, I think, is important. I do think you need to learn grappling as well. So wrestling or jiu-jitsu or something like that. And I do think that there's a massive benefit with regards to, and I know I've gone off track because the question was like, how would you encourage them to be a great all-around mover? But boxers move unbelievably well. Kickboxers move unbelievably well. So I know I've slightly gone off track when I'm talking about making sure that they're proficient so that they can defend themselves, but also you're developing some really good movement. And if you think about striking sports, and what I spoke about with the javelin there, I would, if I had to choose someone to be able to throw a really good punch or throw like a javelin or something like that, I would choose the punch, even just with regards to movement wise. I think you're going to get, no, I'm not going to pin them against each other. Actually, it doesn't make sense to pin them against each other, but I just think you're going to get a lot of similar things with the throwing versus the punching. And I think the punching is going to be more beneficial or potentially more beneficial in more cases. Grappling, I think, is important. Obviously, some percentage of fights do go to the ground, so you need to be able to grapple. Maybe you don't want to punch someone, maybe you want to choke them out or something like that, put them to sleep. That might be a good option. And for example, there's an 8-year-old kid down in our jiu-jitsu club, and he's brilliant. I'm obsessed with him. I'm obsessed with, not in a weird way, I'm obsessed with watching him because that's an open mat. He has his little gi on and he just walks around and he goes up to the purple belt or the brown belt or the black belt or whoever and just gives him a little nod and they start rolling. And he's like hunting for arm bars, triangles, kimuras, everything. He's rolling around. He's doing sweeps. He's on his neck. He's rolling. He's doing every single thing imaginable. He's learning how to use his strength, how much is enough, how much is too much, what another body feels like, how I manipulate another body. So I think he's developing a ton of great movement awareness of his body, awareness of space, and he's also learning to defend himself at the same time. So I think there's also a discipline factor with learning a martial art, and there's an ego factor and stuff like that, where you're learning to not be a dickhead. Hopefully it seems like that, at least with martial arts. I know that's the old kind of tale around just leave your ego at the door if you're going into a martial arts club or something like that. And I think you're going to get some of that with you're definitely going to get some of that. So learning to not be a dickhead, I think that's important, and learning how to fight so that you don't have to fight, and learning that if you have to fight, here's how much force I can use. So the only issue with that is I think that kid is starting to look like he's literally transforming into jiu-jitsu. So he already moves with a lot of external rotation in everything he does, which is, if you look at jiu-jitsu, it's just flexion and external rotation all of the time. They don't use extension and internal rotation that much at all, because a lot of it is done on your back. And so if I did have a kid that was training a lot of jiu-jitsu like that, like a few days a week at least, I would definitely make sure that was being paired with some sprinting as well, so that they're learning to use their internal rotation and adduction and extension. So I would make sure that they're standing upright. Obviously they're going to be standing upright and playing, but sprinting is probably the perfect foil for jiu-jitsu. They're literally the exact opposite of each other as far as I'm concerned. Now we have a team sport. We have track and field, which I'm really going to narrow down to sprinting, but I would love them to try a bit of everything. We have a striking, so kickboxing, and maybe some jiu-jitsu. Now, I may be going overboard here, but all of these things they don't have to do all of the time for all of the rest of their lives, but at least some of it would be good. So now we're left with something like gymnastics. My kids would probably do gymnastics because my brother owns a gymnastics club. I've coached in the gymnastics club. His 2-year-old son, my godson, is in, basically he's being reared in the gymnastics club, and like he moves really fucking well. He's 2, he's already like hanging off the rings, hanging off the bars, he's rolling, he's doing tumbles, forwards, backwards, he's doing all that stuff. So he moves way better than basically any other 2-year-old that you're going to see. He's way stronger as well. He has a little 6-pack on him. So he's built a lot of strength. He's probably going to keep a hold of like his flexibility. So I think gymnastics could be great, particularly for boys, to be honest, because boys will tend to get a lot tighter when they get towards their teens. And a lot of people go and try and stretch when they get older to try and regain lost flexibility, but you're probably better off just not losing it in the first place. So you're definitely better off not losing it in the first place. The issue I have with gymnastics is, as it gets to a competitive level, it can become an issue because there's such demand on flexibility, and people end up stretching a lot, especially through them younger ages. They end up stretching. I've seen it. I've been part of it. And a lot of kids end up with issues. The ones that make it through, obviously, that you see on your television, they're fucking animals. They're absolute animals. A lot of the kids I see end up probably stretching too far. And most of the time, I think the stretching is done really poorly. So I probably wouldn't want my kid to get to a competitive level. And competitive it's not even like, that doesn't even mean a high level. I would just want them to be exposed to maybe a little bit of gymnastics. But I think the benefits that you could get in gymnastics, you're probably going to get in jiu-jitsu and in some kind of striking with kickboxing and grappling. So with kickboxing, for example, like you're probably going to keep some flexibility in your hips. So I don't think they would need to do gymnastics and a striking sport and jiu-jitsu. Obviously in jiu-jitsu, you're getting a lot of the rolling and that type of stuff, which you get some of that in gymnastics as well. So I don't think you would need to do those 2 things or those 3 things. I think you could choose probably between jiu-jitsu and gymnastics and maybe kickboxing and grappling. If you're just talking about pure like development of good movement, then you could choose. But if I was going to choose, I would much prefer my kids were, again, proficient at striking rather than, if I had to choose between like striking and gymnastics, I would choose striking. Again, I'm placing a massive importance on the ability to defend themselves and the confidence that it comes with that. I think I definitely definitely, probably that doesn't make sense, but I definitely had some anxiety some of the time when I was younger, going into town as a 13-year-old, having €10 in your pocket and your phone and worrying, are you going to get robbed? And going out into town when you're having a few beers, there is that thing at the back of your head all the time. You could get punched here, and I do have the ability to defend yourself. And yeah, maybe you don't. So I think that's important. There's that like Jordan Peterson quote of, a harmless man is not a good man. Dangerous man, something like a good man is a dangerous man who doesn't need to be dangerous or something like that. He has control. So I know some of you don't like Jordan Peterson. That's fine. I think that's a brilliant quote. I think you want the ability to be dangerous if you need to. And a strong man or woman, strong like mentally, physically, emotionally, is someone who is not just fucking useless. Is someone who has the ability to do something if they need to. They just choose not to. So I would love my kids to have the potential to be dangerous if they need to, rather than, okay, I need to do something in this situation and I'm not able to. So I definitely wouldn't like them to do that, to have that. Okay, so then the last kind of one then is parkour, which I can actually remember sitting down I know where I was in Waterford, and I can remember waiting for a bus with a couple of friends, just hanging out on a Saturday. And I can remember seeing guys that were from our school that were, yeah, we would consider them, and we definitely did at the time, consider them like geeks or nerds or something like that, because they didn't play team sports. They didn't play football with us or rugby with us or anything like that. And they were doing what I now know as parkour. They were climbing up fucking lampposts, jumping off stuff, and we were like, what in fuck's name are these lads playing at? Like, we were just laughing at them. And now I was like, fucking hell, that was amazing what they were doing. They were learning how to climb, learning how to manage collisions, how to yield, how to overcome, how to build strength, get tendon development. They were doing amazing things. They were also having fun. They were problem solving. They were figuring out what their body could handle and what they couldn't handle. Parkour would be, or some version of parkour, free running, all this stuff. It would be pretty unbelievable. It would be pretty class for any child to have some development in that, because also it's likely that that means their playground is basically anywhere, and they're going to be very strong, and they're going to be able to manage collisions, and they're going to be able to solve problems. And they're if you just, all you need to do is type in like parkour into YouTube or something like that, and that it speaks for itself how well those people actually move. So we've gone through a lot of things. Rugby, back to the team sports, I wouldn't let my kid play rugby. Or not that I wouldn't let them, like I'm not going to be, and it's funny that I even say that. Like, I'm the type of person that, if you said that to me, if you said 10 years ago to me, you'll be on a podcast in 10 years time saying you wouldn't let your kid play rugby, or you're afraid, like with your kid, of going doing a striking sport that they're going to get hit in the head, I would say, what the fuck, go and fucking do it, it'll be fine, don't be a bitch, basically. And now I've completely flipped. So I think maybe it's just a personal bias, but my worst concussion happened playing rugby. I got elbowed in the eye, and I know it's a bit of a freak accident, but also it's not that much of a freak accident. The rugby players that you see now, like the amount of things that are coming out, and this might be the same for American football, which I don't know as much about, but the amount of shit with concussions that's coming out now, I know they're trying to change the rules. I know they're working hard to do that, but fair enough in American football, because they were actually tackling with their heads. You do not want your kids tackling with their heads. So fair enough, they've taken out that rule and people aren't doing that anymore. But in rugby, it's not that they were tackling with their heads. It's that and I know they're trying to lower the tackle and all this stuff, but to be honest, I think rugby is fucked as a sport, because how do you stop these collisions happening? My job is literally to be 6'7", 130 kilos and run as hard. There is no incentive for me to try and, at that size, to try and run around you. My job is to run through you if I'm that size and that type of person. I just can't see. And every single rugby game you watch now, there is a red card for some illegal collision that was a complete accident. It's impossible to cut out of the game. If you're going to try and cut it out of the game, it's not the same game anymore. It's not rugby anymore. So I just don't think that I would be comfortable with my kid playing rugby based on what I've seen, what happened to me, and based on like the opportunity costs of just go and play hurling. You're going to get rugby was very helpful for me, I have to say, with regards to how it helped me with other sports. It brought out a level of the aggression in me that I was definitely missing when I was playing hurling and soccer and Gaelic football. I was way too passive when I was playing those sports, and I suffered. I wasn't playing well as a result, probably. I was definitely playing below my ability. And rugby changed that. It brought out a level of aggression and it stopped me being as passive. So it definitely helped me, but I just don't feel like the rewards are there for a kid of mine to play rugby, unless obviously if they really wanted to. But for what I know about head injuries, I think the risks are probably too high. And yes, you could say the risks are high with everything. Don't come at me with that bullshit. Or you could get something could happen walking across the street. Of course it could. But also, if you walk across the street with your eyes closed, something is more likely to happen. So we can mitigate risk. And I think rugby, I personally think it's a bit too risky, especially when you can get all these benefits from just playing other sports, and probably, to be honest, like more benefits from other sports. Like there's more demand on skill development really in hurling or basketball, the amount of skills that you need to develop to be really good at those versus fucking half the rugby players. Now obviously some rugby players are unbelievably talented, but half the players are just big fucking lumps and they have no skill. They literally they haven't passed the ball in 10 years. They literally, if the ball comes to them, they just grab it and they just whack into someone else. Now, look, yeah, fair enough. The argument against that is, okay, what if you had a child that was bigger and like that was the sport that they were suited to? Fair enough. I can understand that argument. I would probably still have a counter argument, but I won't go into it now. So for me, what would I encourage kids to play to help them develop into a great all-around mover? A team sport like soccer, basketball, something like that, I think non-negotiable, absolutely. Sprinting, non-negotiable. And then in terms of self-defense, I think kids will benefit massively, and adults probably, from learning to defend themselves. So I think, and other people know much more about this than me, but for me, most fights don't go to ground. They go to ground once someone's been punched in the head. A lot of fights do go to ground, but most don't. So I would like my kid to be good at probably kickboxing. So because maybe you can just hit someone a calf kick and they go to ground and you can run off. So Muay Thai or something like that, these calf kicks and different types of kicks, you could just absolutely bend someone over by doing one of those. So I think I would like them to be proficient at that, but I don't want to get hit in the head. Jiu-Jitsu or grappling for learning, not just learning to defend yourself on the ground, but learning to, if you look at videos of wrestlers, fucking hell. I'm not talking about WWE wrestlers now. Obviously, a lot of them are great movers because they probably were wrestlers in college and stuff, but proper wrestlers, they are some of the most explosive athletes you will ever see. So I think grappling, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, that stuff is really good for learning about your body. Gymnastics, great option, but just but I wouldn't encourage them to go too far down the competitive side of it, because it can end up, it depends on the club and the coach, of course, but they will get stretched into oblivion and will stretch through some of their ligaments. And I've seen a lot of gymnasts who, they look amazing and stuff, and they end up doing CrossFit because they can access all these deep positions. They're not doing gymnastics anymore as they get a bit older, and all the CrossFit people are so impressed with them. But if you speak to the gymnasts, they'll tell you often they feel like shit because they have all this range that they did so much passive stretching, let's say, as a child, that, and now they are strong as well, of course, but they have a lot of issues, and this is from seeing a lot of these people. So they can have a lot of issues. It doesn't have to be the case, don't get me wrong. Is Simone Biles an absolute animal? Yes, but I think it depends on the club and the coach. So I wouldn't be too keen on them getting to the competitive side of things. And then parkour, I don't know any like parkour coaches in around or anything like that, but to encourage your kids to do a bit of that stuff, amazing. The other one is probably tennis. I think tennis could be brilliant if you were interested in them. Like if you had the choice between tennis and golf, you're probably choosing tennis. Obviously, it's a more more dynamic sport, much more variety in terms of movement. You're still getting some of that like throwing or striking action as you serve, as you hit the ball in different ways. You're getting lots of that stuff happening. So yeah, tennis is a great option as well. So maybe I went on a bit too long about that, but I would love to hear your answers there. So maybe if you can, maybe you want to email me or something like that, or comment on the YouTube video, that would be cool. Actually, let me know. Let's say you could only pick 3. Let me know what 3 you would pick, and why. And I don't ever ask you to comment, but I would like you to comment because, yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so next question. If you're stuck for time in clinic and your assessment skills aren't up to scratch yet, you're spending a lot of time in that portion of the session. Maybe you're doing some manual therapy as well. Any advice for giving homework? So you don't have time to coach the movements as much. You're spending time maybe doing manual therapy, assessment, chatting with them, but you still want them to do their homework, a couple of movements at home. I think rather than trying to spend 30 seconds half coaching, the long-term answer is obviously structuring your session in a way where the largest part of the session is spent on working on movement. That is what I've done. That is the play. 100% that is the play. I understand people use manual therapy. I don't have any issue with that. Maybe manual therapy is a big portion of what your job is, but you would like to get better at coaching movement and dive a little bit more into the rehabby and exercise side of things. That just means you need to cut the manual therapy part of the session short by 3, 4, 5 minutes, and you need to be very clear on the assessment section then, and think, okay, what's the biggest bang for my buck movement that I could give someone to help them get the most gains based on what the biggest elephant in the room is, what's the biggest issue that they have, what's the movement that I could use to help them, and what I think that they're going to be most successful with. So that's the long-term play, is cutting all the other shit short and focusing on the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. But in the short term, you're saying your assessment skills aren't up to scratch and you're struggling, like maybe it's just a time management thing or something like that. But in the short term and in the long term as well, this counts. I would say have some go-to movements. And actually, I'm not even going to say go-to. I would say have some can't lose movements that you go to, that even if you don't get time to coach them in clinic or in the session with someone, you can shoot them over an email. And this is the key point, with a video of the movements. All right. So you can use, of course, if you have our programs, LBB, UB Core, LBB2, the foot one, you should have the YouTube videos for all those. So you can use my exercise library, exercise database. That's what a lot of people use. And they will just shoot over their clients. Okay, here, I want you to do this exercise from UBB. They won't say from UBB or whatever. They'll just say, do the neck relaxation from UB, from the neck section. Do that breathing and do the arm spirals from UBB. So here's 2 videos. I want you to follow these. And if you have someone with a neck issue, those are what I would consider probably can't lose movements. Can't lose, you need to tick a few boxes for it to be a can't lose movement. Box number 1, you haven't got time to coach it in clinic with them. So that means that you actually don't know, does this exercise not have the potential? Does this exercise, is this exercise painful for them or not? So box number 1 on can't lose is this exercise going to be painful for them or not? And even more importantly than is it going to be painful, is it going to cause any damage or anything like that? Is it going to cause, no, let me rephrase that. More important than is it going to be painful, is it going to cause a flare up? Because a bit of pain is fine, but if you cause a massive flare up, that's an issue. So for someone with lower back issues, let's say, they might feel like they're quote unquote flexion intolerant. You might feel like that. Now, flexion could be the very thing that their body needs, but I wouldn't call a flexion based exercise then a no lose or a can't lose exercise. If you haven't got a chance to check it in clinic, then I wouldn't be just saying, okay, here's an exercise for you to try on your own at home. So I would be careful sending someone in that situation an exercise that loads them into flexion, because it could flare them up and now you've either lost the client or you have a very unhappy client. So I wouldn't consider that a can't lose exercise. For and now there is no can't lose exercise, because fucking anything could flare someone up. But box number one is for a can't lose. I don't have the chance to coach it, but if I send this to them afterwards, is there a high probability that they will be able to, number one, do this without causing more pain or a flare up? Box number two, actually do the exercise, be successful in following the steps. So that depends on the client, of course, like how aware they are, how available they are for taking on cues. And box number three is actually give movement, some good quality movement into their body. So those are the boxes that I would tick. With regards to lower back issues, so instead of it being, let's say someone is, you feel like someone has a lower back issue, they might not love moving into flexion or extension at the moment. Your options could be, okay, I could give them a Jefferson curl type of movement or like a roll down type of movement where they move from flexion to extension. But that, I wouldn't consider that a can't lose movement. I would consider lying on my back and doing some pelvic tilts like we have in core or UBB or LBB or scissor slides. I would consider that a can't, let's take scissor slides and pelvic tilts. They're can't lose movements for if someone comes in with hip issues, lower back issues, lateral hip, pelvic floor, all this stuff. They are definitely can't lose movements. Yes, someone could get flared up. It's very unlikely. I don't think it's happened. So I don't think it's happened to me. So I would consider having those, either you film those yourself or you use the ones from my exercises, from my exercise library or the videos that you have from me. I would consider using those as can't lose movements. So you now don't probably need to coach them in clinic. You can send them afterwards and you just say, I want you to do these for 10, 15, 20 reps on each side every day. Just go nice and slow to begin with, and then make the movement a little bit bigger if you start to feel comfortable. Can't lose. With the neck, I would say can't lose movements with the neck is probably like a gentle neck rotation, a neck rotation. Literally draw a very small circle with your nose and then start to make that a little bit bigger. I would consider that like probably like a can't lose movement. Even more so than that, a can't lose movement for the neck, because that could potentially cause a flare up. It's unlikely, but it could. Even more so would be like literally just lying on the floor and going from a tucked chin to an untucked chin and then rotating left and right. We have on DJR Interactive, we have a neck flicks and chill class where I go through super gentle reaches for the shoulder, super gentle movements for the neck and the jaw. So some of those would definitely be considered can't lose movements, and that's why I have them like in lower body basics. That's why the pelvic tilts, the scissor slides, stuff like that are there. With the knee, what are considered some probably can't lose movements, tibial rotations, hard to lose doing tibial rotations, ticks a box. They're not actually standing on, it's open chain. They're gently moving their tibia. That's number one. Number two, they will struggle with it and be challenged by it and will actually start to learn it. That's number two. So like they will actually get some movement that they don't have access to, or at least, yeah, they will grease up the joint. So can't lose in that way. Number three, it's hard to get it wrong. And number four, like it's hard to not feel it. You will start to feel your shin moving around. So it's hard to not feel it. Whereas if you try and maybe coach a hinge, you didn't get time to coach a hinge and you feel like this client is not someone that's particularly aware. Or there's a hair on my microphone. Did I get it? I think so. They're not particularly aware, then maybe the hinge is not the way to go. It doesn't mean you should never coach it. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm not coaching this because it's not too hard. It's just that I didn't have time in this session to coach it. So maybe I will go with some other exercises instead of that. So I think that's my answer, is have some go-to movements and have a little exercise library, have 20 exercises. Now, don't fall into the trap of doing this all of the time, because this is what a lot of therapists do. They fall into the trap of just having these go-to movements, these can't lose movements, or they think they're can't lose. Like an example of not a can't lose movement is, okay, they have pain between their shoulder blades. I'm going to give them band pull aparts. That is not a can't lose movement. A lot of people need to get some space back in there. That's not a can't lose movement. A tibial rotation is a can't lose movement because you're not actually like contracting an area very hard like you would be with a band pull apart. You're literally just getting a joint and moving it. So a lot of can't lose movements are literally just going to the joint and getting that moving. Hard to go wrong, hard to overload it, hard to mess it up, and hard to not feel it as well. You start to feel the joint moving, and very safe. So that is what I would say for those. Anything else? That other question? No, I won't. I'll leave that for now. So yeah, I hope that was helpful with regards to just make sure you're following the podcast as well. If you watch it on YouTube, actually, I would love if you went to YouTube and click subscribe. That would be great. That would be really helpful. If you're not already, that would be good. And the podcast is on YouTube as well if you want to watch sometimes. That's up to you. I prefer listening on audio, to be honest. I'm not a big YouTube guy, but we have some good stuff on our YouTube that you might be interested in. So make sure you click subscribe there. And if you listen on like podcast or Apple, make sure you click follow. That does make a really big difference, and you'll be notified immediately when you get when a new episode drops. And that's really cool. Like the podcast that I do listening to, that is very helpful for me. I just get a little ping and the podcast is there, and I find that very helpful. It's not just me asking you to do that. I find that really helpful. So I would love if you did. That would be really good. Click 5 stars while you're there. But more importantly, just make sure you're following, you're subscribed. And yeah, workshop wise, we have Montreal for sale at the moment. Every other workshop that we're going to soon are all sold out except for Montreal. So go and buy a ticket for Montreal. I think there might be one ticket actually left for Dublin. May not be still there, but that's our last Irish workshop at here. So have a look on the website. Maybe Dublin is still available, but definitely there'll be at least 3 or 4 tickets left for Montreal in June, I think it is. So jump on to those tickets if you're interested in coming along. That would be cool. I'm looking forward to going to Canada. We're going to Vancouver. That's sold out. And then there's a few left for Montreal. We're going there with Greg Stern. So I can't wait for that one. So jump on that. And apart from that, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know what sports you think would be good. Hopefully, like, that was a somewhat beneficial chat to even just think about the different types of qualities that will be developed in different ways. And I'll chat to you guys next week. Take care.